Welcome to episode 206 of the Campus Comics Cast. In this episode, one Mike Atchison has promised me we will keep it under 6 hours as we discuss his all-time favorite character, Elongated Man. My name is Scott Reed, and I'm joined on this episode by
the world's greatest Elongated Man fan, Mike Atchison.
And of course, in this episode, we're going to talk about the first 5 appearances of that one said Elongated Man, who is not the same thing as Plastic Man. Then we're going to cover Where Monsters Lie by one Kyle Starks. And if we have time, we'll do a CLZ Shake. But before that, I do want to talk about some industry news, at least briefly. This is fresh off the wire. We are recording this on March 25th. And this announcement came out from Alliance Entertainment on March 25th. This is from the Alliance Entertainment website. Alliance Entertainment Holding Corporation, a global distributor and wholesaler specializing in music, movies, video games, electronics, arcades, and collectibles, today announced that it has been selected as the winning bidder to acquire substantially all of the assets of Diamond Comics Distributor Incorporated, currently being sold through a court-supervised bankruptcy process. The proposed acquisition, which is subject to bankruptcy court approval, includes Diamond Comics Distributors, Alliance Game Distributors, Diamond Select Toys and Collectibles, and Collectible Grading Authority, which collectively represent a 42-year-old enterprise recognized as a category-defining leader in comic books, tabletop games, pop culture merchandise, and collectible grading. So this is kind of a big announcement. It's still up in the air just a little bit. I think Mike, both you and I had seen rumors that maybe even Todd McFarlane was going to be buying Diamond. So do you have any initial thoughts about this news release?
No, it's. I mean, literally, and I didn't know about it until you said something before we started recording. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, there's just a lot. I don't even know if Alliance Entertainment is associated with Alliance Game Distributors. I assume maybe, but that was already
possibly.
Yeah.
But I think part of it's like a UK thing and part of it's a US thing. You know, when you get these international organizations, sometimes they are different pieces at different spots. So
well, either way, it's good because even though there's been a lot of over the years consternation about the pseudo monopoly that Diamond had, it did make it very convenient for shops and for people to get their comics. You didn't have to go to a slew of different, distributors. And I mean, it's like we didn't have an in between. We didn't have. It was either we had the one or we had nothing or we had a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to maybe bring things a little bit more into balance.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll get some direction from the bankruptcy court on if this is going to be approved. And then we'll find out what, if anything, is going to change. So that kind of is the important news. I mean, it doesn't matter to me who owns it. It's just like what will be different once all of the dust settles on this.
Yeah. I'd say Mr. Deppy might be wiping his brow right now and not having to sweat so much. So that's good.
So anyway, be sure to, check the news frequently as things are progressing on the Diamond bankruptcy, and keep an eye on those pre-orders. So before we get into Elongated Man, I know it's killing Mike to delay talking about this. We did have some listener feedback I'd like to mention. This is again from Michael Cathro. This is from our last previews, episode 205. And Michael says, I'm really looking forward to the JSApril event. Will there be a list showing which podcasters are participating? Doing the first 5 appearances of Elongated Man will be interesting. It is a bit interesting that he and Plastic Man are so similar, not just in powers, but in occupation as well. EM, is a detective with a twitching nose, no less, and PM joined the police at the end of his quality run. It's funny, DC ended up with both of them. So to answer the first question, yes, there is a central location where you can get all of the information about the JSApril event, and that can be found at fireandwaterpodcast.com/podcast/JSApril. So JSApril there. So hit the fireandwaterpodcast.com site. It will give you a list of all of the proposed JSApril events. Now, Mike, do you want to go ahead and address, and I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit about Plastic Man during our Elongated Man discussion, but do you have any initial comments for Michael about Plastic Man and Elongated Man and their similarities?
I think he might be overstating, Michael, the similarities, because it is, first of all, I think the unique quality, no pun intended, of Plastic Man when he was with Quality Comics is that he was a criminal first, and he converted, or he was reformed. So he joined the side of the light.
No pun intended. Ah.
Oh gosh, yeah. So that to me is what stands out as the biggest difference. Now, so what they have in common though is they both have kind of big egos. They just express them in different ways. They both have a sense of humor. One has, like, I'd say Three Stooges humor, very gag-oriented humor. That'd be Plastic Man. And then with Elongated Man, it's more like dad joke humor. Yeah.
All right. So, well, speaking of Elongated Man, before we get into Elongated Man, I blew the segue. Just completely blew it right there. But do you want to provide some additional information about the JSApril event that we will be participating in?
Well, sure. I'll give my live rendition of Shag Matthews, the brainchild behind the whole JSApril event. His script. I'm basically just going to recite it. So, celebrating 85 years of the world's first and greatest superhero team. Back in 1940, 8 sensational heroes united to create the world's very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. Now, 85 years later, we're gathering podcasters and bloggers from around the globe for a month-long celebration in an event that's called JSApril. So throughout April of 2025, you can join dozens of podcasters and bloggers as they each share their own unique tributes to the original and greatest superhero team. Every participant in JSApril is doing their own thing, so whether you choose to enjoy just one entry or experience them all, there's something special for everyone. Get ready for an all-star month of beloved characters, fascinating insights, and incredible stories. And you can follow the action on social media with hashtag JSApril. Visit the website that Scott just recited for a complete list of participating podcasters, bloggers, and what they're each covering.
All right. And just for the record, our episode is already in the can and will be going live definitely by April 1st. You will be able to, even though it's JSApril, I may just want to make sure ours is out there, ready to go. So definitely by April 1st, no April Fools. This will be out there and ready for you to hit. It's going to be our episode 207, which we are currently recording 206. So even within a few days of you getting 206, you will probably see 207.
Yep.
All right, Mike, I don't feel like I can hold you back any longer. It's time. First 5 appearances of Elongated Man. Well, Why don't you introduce us to that?
Okay, I don't know what really prompted you to offer that up as our next highlighted or spotlighted character. I know we kind of have a rotating process of Marvel, DC, and Independent, but I was pretty much elated to hear that you mentioned Elongated Man, because it's true. Yeah, he's my favorite character, and I've always been the fan of underdog characters, sports teams, whatever, and he is the consummate underdog. So he was pretty much created by accident. John Broome and Carmine Infantino created him, and it was groundbreaking DC editor Julius Schwartz, who kind of like brought out the Silver Age, or inaugurated the Silver Age. He wanted to create a new supporting character for the Flash. Um, he later in an interview he said that Elongated Man was only created because he had not realized that Plastic Man was available because DC obtained the rights to him in 1956 alongside all of the other Quality Comics properties. So it literally an accidental character. But again, this makes it even a better story, I think.
Yes.
Uh, it's interesting to note, though. I read in an article somewhere, maybe it was Amazing World of Comics, DC Comics or something, but it was Infantino and inker Murphy Anderson stated that they had never used Plastic Man as a reference. They kind of, it was all whole cloth work that they did. Infantino said in his biography that he really liked Elongated Man because he was comical and he enjoyed drawing comedy. And it was one of his favorite strips. It was as close to animation as he could do in a comic book, and he liked being able to test the limits of the comic book form, and the Flash comic with Elongated Man as a co-star did that for him. If you move forward to in publication history, EM, as you might want to shorten it because Elongated Man's a mouthful. EM he began a solo feature in Detective Comics in Detective Comics 327 that went all the way through to 383. So it was a long run. It was a backup feature, and it's where a lot of his traits and his uniqueness kind of came to the fore. His wife Sue Dearbon and the formerly Dearbon, her maiden name, they like to travel the world, travel the U.S., and solve mysteries, and they would team up with different heroes here and there. He also had a backup feature in the Flash comics for a while, and eventually, though, he became a member of the Justice League of America, and he's mostly seen in that title from like 1973 to 1995. So a long run as a not a top tier character, but a very well loved character, you might say.
Well, our first question on our first five is always, what was your first introduction to this character? Now, I'm going to start because my answer will be a whole lot briefer than yours, Mike, I suspect. But I am not for sure where I was first introduced to Elongated Man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know for certain that it was at the absolute latest Justice League Europe #1, which is what, 1989?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that, because he was a member of that Justice League team, which later becomes Justice League International, I think, or something along that lines. That was part of the Bwahaha League, of course, which that Giffen DeMatteis run on the Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that book still in my collection. I have fond memories of that book. However, I don't really remember a whole lot of what Elongated Man did in those stories. So that's some things that jump out to me. Like I remember the whole One Punch and a lot of Blue Beetle, a lot of Booster Gold, but I do not remember a whole lot of Elongated Man.
Yeah, he that was sort of his. If you kind of break it down into generations or different phases of his life, that tenure with the Justice League / Justice League International / Justice League Europe in the late 80s going on into the 90s was, I'd say, the third phase. It was when it was very much humor oriented, and it ran its course, and it was a lot of fun. You had artists on like Justice League America. You had, of course, Kevin Maguire, a big fan favorite, but on the Europe side of things, you had Bart Sears and some others,
yeah.
but Sears stands out as the defining artist of Justice League Europe. And again, it wasn't just as opposed to Plastic Man's, the humor was based on his contortions or his, goofiness. It was more based on the back and forth marital bickering slash love between him and his wife Sue, which is endearing to this day, and it was really played well in Justice League Europe.
So, what was your introduction to Elongated Man, Mike?
You know, I knew the era. I knew I had to really go back and look at my Justice League comics, and I really landed on Justice League of America 134. And that's probably around 75 or so, 1975. It was, I don't know if it was a 30-cent issue, but it's got the cover with Despero is the villain, and the Justice Leaguers, including Elongated Man and even Supergirl, who I thought, looking at the cover, she was a member of the Justice League, and she wasn't. But they're fighting on a giant hand in space. And I remember being knocked out by that cover, and I'm almost certain that was my first comic that I read with Elongated Man and the beginning of my fandom.
Yeah, I probably I probably knew Elongated Man prior to Justice League Europe #1, but I cannot pinpoint any particular issue. I could probably go back, and it's one of those things where you suddenly you see a comic book and then it's like, oh, I did read this however long ago,
Yeah.
because I don't remember Elongated Man being a new character to me when I started reading Justice League Europe, so I felt like I knew all of the characters, but I just can't pinpoint a particular book prior to that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's like a lot of things. Our memory just remembers generalizations, and it could have been a different issue, but that's one I'm going to go ahead and land on. So yeah, it's a cool cover, and you know right off the bat he's got that sense of humor, and I knew he was fun.
So, again, I'm going to answer all these questions first, because I just want to give you plenty of time to digest and say what you want to say on this character.
Yep.
So the next question is, what are your initial thoughts on the original version of Elongated Man? So for me, it feels a little silly, which I guess is okay for Elongated Man. But this whole concept to me of a stretchy guy who is competing with the Flash to be the most popular hero in, Central City, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, phew, that would have been embarrassing. As if there would be any contest between Elongated Man and the Flash, for that. I guess they were heroes of the city or something for one of the years that they talked about this, if I remember correctly from the reading.
Yeah.
But some of the ways that they have these two work in tandem with each other. How many times does the Flash pick up Elongated Man and runs him around with Elongated Man stretching out in front of the Flash to like catch up with somebody? Or it's like, couldn't Flash just run and do it, or couldn't Elongated Man just stretch and do it? So this was these stories were so, especially the first 5 appearances, were so Silver Age that it borderline on as absurd for me.
Yeah, it's like they were taking as far as the power sets go, a alpha level character as far as powers, Flash, to a kind of a low tier power level. But I have to give them credit, even though some of it was far fetched. Like you said, Flash could probably reach out and touch a villain as fast as Elongated Man could stretch and do something to him. But I remember seeing a scene in one of these issues we read where he's on the shoulders of the Flash and they're running, and he just can, their teamwork was pretty cool to see, even though as far-fetched as it was. So yeah, it was
like on the very first page, it's like a splash of the Flash dreaming that he's in a race with Elongated Man, and Elongated Man is stretching faster than the Flash is running. Now, this is, of course, a dream sequence, but it's just like, he can't keep up. Like Flash is running to save a kitten that has fallen, and Elongated Man outstretches the Flash to catch the cat before the Flash can actually get there. It's just like, really? That just seems kind of weird.
And even the cover of the first appearance of Elongated Man is Flash 112, it's basically Flash chasing Elongated Man, and they're going past the tree, and Elongated Man just stretches around behind the tree and says he can catch Flash now, which,
Yeah.
physics doesn't work that way, but it's
No.
visually it's fun.
Yeah. And I guess that's what we have to remember. It's like, okay, these are not meant to be scientifically accurate or make a whole lot of sense. It's just the way that they were telling the story at the time.
Yeah.
Don't think about it too much.
Right. Right.
Just accept it at face value, suspend your disbelief, and move on.
Exactly.
So, Mike, your initial thoughts on this version of the character?
I mean, there was a lot. I mean, it was just, I always, like I said earlier, I like the underdog. I like that the humor. I like that he had a great marriage, even though as a kid, I don't know, that's maybe more of an adult perspective than what, but it was unique in that you didn't see many married superheroes, and everybody loved him. I liked that it was also he was kind of known pretty early. He wore a mask in the first few appearances, but eventually he took that mask off because he just wanted to be famous. He wanted people to know what his alter ego was. And he wasn't like, he didn't get bit by a radioactive spider or, wasn't shipwrecked here and from another planet. He purposely tried to figure out how all of those contortionists, like your what they used to call the Indian rubber man or whatever in circuses, how they were able to bend their bodies like that. So he noticed that all of them would drink the same soda, or soda water as they called it, Gingold. And he started, like as one does back then, you get your chemistry set out and you start deconstructing it, and he figured out that the main ingredient was this gingo fruit in the Yucatan in Mexico, and that's what gave those guys their elasticity. Well, he was able to boil it down to an extract, and I don't want to say he was he was shooting up the stuff, but basically he must have had a really concentrated version of it because it gave him really. So basically, anybody could do what he does if they drank the same stuff. So I thought that was unique. And yeah, I mean, it's the whole teamwork with his wife, and she basically became another member of the Justice League, which was really unique. So those are my first thoughts about him.
So, how much do we know about this character's origin? From these initial stories, and I've got to close part of my thing here so I can actually read the entire question from these 5 issues. Is there anything that has been forgotten, changed, or retconned that you know of? So this is actually going to be more of a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is the whole drinking Gingold still part of his origin story, or has that been modified? I know, like on the Marvel side, Hank Pym used to take like pills to get his powers, so they obviously have removed the pill taking from Hank Pym's power ability.
Yeah.
Is the drinking the Gingold still a part of his origin, or have they tweaked that any that you know of?
Well, I'd love to be able to tell you, but I can't because he hasn't been seen in his original form, I guess you'd say, since the 52 series. They had
Wow.
a new 52 in 2010 or so, whenever that started. They had a rendition of him that was called, I forgot his name, Big Boss or something like that. It was by Gail Simone, and he was able to change forms, and he didn't look anything like what you'd expect. Later on, he had this orange suit, and I mean, I never seen. Last time I seen him anywhere except for this briefly in Justice League Unlimited, I seen him in Detective Comics 1000, and
Okay.
I was like, no, that's not my Ralph. That's not. It doesn't just. It's like, I don't know who designed this costume. I don't know, but he didn't have any dialogue, and I don't think he's had any dialogue in the Justice League Unlimited. I mean, I'm holding out hope, but so it's hard for me to say whether, or how he maintains his powers as compared to what he did for the first, 30 or 40 years. So, I don't know.
I guess to me, and you've talked about this before, one of the defining aspects of Elongated Man is not so much his power set, but his relationship with Sue.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that is one of the terrible stories that has happened in DC, and that was part of Final Crisis.
Identity Crisis. Yeah.
Identity Crisis. Okay, sorry, which I haven't read. I probably should at some point, but where, not to spoil anything, but some terrible things happened to Sue Dearbon, and I'm curious to know if there's been any hint since we've had New 52 since then, and Rebirth since then, and Dawn of DC since then, if they have done away with any of that with Sue Dearbon. Have we seen Sue even? I know you've said we've not really seen Elongated Man, so I guess it makes sense that we don't have any idea what the current state of Sue Dearbon is in the DC universe.
Well, as a matter of fact, the one scene that he was in Detective Comics 1000, he was standing next to Sue.
Oh, okay.
So for a period of time after they were both dead in comic, not to shock anyone here, but they were both dead for a while, and they were ghost detectives. So, what was the series you and I and Chad reviewed, the Dead Boy Detectives?
Dead Boy Detectives.
So
okay,
I don't know that they ever got to that level of good stories. It was, but that was the premise. They were ghostly detectives, and it was like having our cake and eat it too. They let his death be continuity, but then still tell stories about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I assume Dead Man probably showed up at some point
I'm
in
sure.
those stories too.
I'm sure, yeah. But again, that must be, if there's any out there, I haven't researched, I haven't looked for it.
Okay.
I really kind of want my fanboy version of Ralph Dibny and Sue.
So do you want to add anything about the character's origin or retcons, things that have forgotten or changed about Elongated Man to that discussion?
No, I mean, he's like I said, he's yet to be properly brought back after the events of Identity Crisis in 52. And like I said, that new 52 version, at least the part in the Gail Simone's Secret Six, that was good, but it wasn't at all the same. And then whatever version showed up in Detective 1000 and whatever else is, that one was not at all good. And now he's I think wearing his light purple and white uniform in Justice League Unlimited. But I'm just looking for something more centric to him and Sue, a story to come out. There's got to be somebody who can come up with a good story about him or about them. And I'm just kind of holding out hope for that.
Okay. All right, so power set is pretty straightforward. So what powers does this character display in these issues? So basically beyond stretching and then I guess ultimately some detective skills, what would you have to add to Elongated Man's power set?
It wasn't, I mean, the stretchiness, he's not Plastic Man. He can't really, not like Plastic Man, take the form of a bench or whatever, a park bench. He can make his nose bigger or his ears bigger to kind of accentuate his senses, because that helps his detective work. He can stretch thin enough to go under a door to get through places that other people couldn't get through without busting it down. And yeah, he's got that deal where his nose wiggles. It's just I guess a nervous habit when he has a mystery. That was first actually mentioned or shown in Detective Comics 329 during that big run in Detective. So yeah, the powers though, no, it's his humor and his detective and his stretching, and to some extent he could do more than just stretch. He could, like I said, put his ears out and his nose.
Okay. And of course, stretch faster than the Flash can run. I mean,
that's one way to look at it. Yeah, he can stretch faster than the Flash can run. Take that.
Well, you've kind of already answered our next question. And how closely does this version of the character match with what we see in comics today? What is the same? What is different? So I think ultimately the answer is we don't see Elongated Man in comics today until whatever we get in Justice League Unlimited starts happening, right?
Right. And, I mean, even though we don't have a current version of him that's prominent, his most of what he's, other than his uniform, everything's been pretty much the same. His power set, his detective skills. I mean, everybody's got their favorite costume for him, like they do some characters. I like the black and red, the Satellite Justice League version. Some people like that purple and white EM. It's kind of like the EM's kind of offset. But
that's the one that I'm most familiar with because that's what's from Justice League Europe.
Yeah.
So when I think of Elongated Man, that's the costume that I picture him in.
And like I said, the Charlie Brown orange sweatshirt looking thing with the zig, that's, if you look online, you'll see that and wonder who in the heck designed it. So I hope I don't offend anybody, but that is the worst costume design I've ever seen.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sure there are probably some worse out there, but we'll accept that answer for now.
Right.
So.
Oh, and he did have, I guess that compares to his very first costume was in these issues we're covering. He had this darker purple costume with, I never could understand. I guess it's like they thought, well, we need to give him a little bit more material on the gloves and the costume because it was always scrunched up when he wasn't stretching. So it's like, well, we got to let it scrunch up. It was, and he had a big mask, which didn't
quite fit his face.
No,
yeah.
no, it was too big.
So, all right, this is your favorite part, Mike, and this is where I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna give you 30 minutes, and then after 30 minutes, I'm gonna have to curtail you a little bit. So, what are the moments in the first 5 issues that you want to call attention to? Now, I've already mentioned the big one, and that's that constant use of the Flash running, carrying Elongated Man so he can stretch out in front of the Flash.
Yeah. It's pretty brief to believe.
How can we combine these two?
Well, believe it or not, I don't have a bunch. I mean, it's a lot of the same stuff. I mean, Flash 112 is the first appearance. He was introduced. As is common, he was introduced as an adversary, and they figure out that they're not out to get each other, and they team up, Flash and him. There was also a Kid Flash backup story in that issue. The cover to Flash 115, it's the Fat Flash and Gorilla, Fat Flash story, and he's fighting Gorilla Grodd. The Elongated Man backup is just another basic story where he teams up with the Flash to fight some aliens trying to shrink and take over the Earth. So, again, I mean, unless I was to point out every Silver Age trope, there's not a lot to say about these. I do like this is an early introduction of a lot of the, not an introduction because some have been around already, but every issue you're getting to see another really great rogue. So the next story is 119 with Mirror Master, who's always been a favorite of mine, and then the backup stories with Elongated Man, and this is the one where it's announced. You don't see the marriage, but you see the newspaper on the front page saying that Elongated Man marries debutante Sue Dearbon. Now, I tell you, Scott, until I started reading these, I had in my head that her name was Dearborn, but it's Dearbon. And I mean, 40 plus years here, I've been saying it differently in my head, but and Barry Allen, or I should say the Flash, because they didn't know each other's secret identities. Flash is the best man in the wedding that we learned.
They become quick friends, obviously. So.
Yeah. That one's like an undersea story. They're fighting some undersea creatures that are basically like aliens, and they're trying to make slaves of the people on the surface.
And they fish for people.
Yeah, they fish for people. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, like I said, Silver Age, man. I had to crack up though because once they, Flash and Elongated Man escape the aliens and they conquer them, or they tell them they run them off, or the undersea creatures. Ralph is reunited with Sue to continue their honeymoon, but they invite Flash to tag along. I'm like, whoa, that's okay.
Well, hey,
Yeah. But it's a fun story.
You got to remember, this is also the time period whenever you had TV couples, they slept in separate twin beds.
Sure. Oh, yeah. You could.
So, it fits. So, there you go.
Then the next appearance was Flash 124, where Flash teamed with Elongated Man, and they fought Captain Boomerang, and it was interesting. Boomerang was like, they had to fight him, and then they realized that Boomerang needed to help them defeat the bad guys.
Hmm.
Again, you see really early on that Ralph and Sue's shtick is that they're always on vacation. They're always, I don't know if maybe because she was a debutante, she was rich, and they could just kind of travel the globe together and solve mysteries.
And once
Yeah.
again, a flung boomerang because the Flash is carrying Elongated Man on his shoulders. He's able to reach up and catch
Right.
the flung boomerang.
Yeah. Yeah, you had to make a teamwork out of it.
There you go. That's right. So that's their go to. That's their special ability.
And then this issue 124 is the one where it's first made known that Ralph likes the public attention of being a superhero. Um, then Flash. Oh, sorry. You were gonna say?
Now, I was just going to say, the only one thing I was going to add is I'm glad you've said that again, because I meant to say it earlier. But this is a lot to me like Booster Gold.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Booster Gold wants the attention. He just has this time travel shtick that goes with Booster Gold. It's just he's a hero and he likes to have the spotlights, which is like attention, attention, attention. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Flash 130. It was almost like you could look at the cover art and see it was like an advancement of the art. It was a little bit had a black background, and you had all of the rogues, or not all of them, but you had like 4 or 5 of them on the cover. But you're thinking right off the bat that, oh my gosh, they're going to all team up, but they don't on the inside. It's just there's individual. I think he ended up fighting just one of them, but the reason I bring it up is because the second story is Elongated Man, and he teams up with Kid Flash in this story against the Weather Wizard.
Yeah, because the Flash is too busy to help, so he sends Kid Flash.
Yeah, he's like, I got a vacation, man. I can't. Iris would be mad if I if I helped.
So do you have, what is your favorite of these? I'm going to throw it out there of the first 5 because I think Sue is such an important part of this character that third issue, what was it, issue 120, 119,
119, yeah.
is like my favorite because we get Sue early on. It's not like a real late addition to the character, so I just felt like that was probably, of the first 5, that was probably my favorite.
Yeah, and
So what about you?
It's early on that she's shown to be a fairly independent woman.
Uh-huh.
My favorite is actually the last one, 130, where he teams up with Kid Flash, and it's kind of like the first time they really accentuated his love of a mystery. And since Flash couldn't help him to investigate because he was going on vacation, he asks Kid Flash, and I liked the idea that it was, Kid Flash was Wally West was more than happy to join him, and they beat old Weather Wizard, and it just was a good fun story, and I liked the idea that it was where we first learned about his love of mysteries. Even though,
So
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
maybe I mentioned already, I think his wiggly nose comes way later. Yeah.
Yeah. So as part of this, since I knew going into this is one of your favorite characters, I let you add a couple of your favorite Elongated Man stories. And do you want to talk about the 2 you chose and why you chose those stories?
This was an interesting quandary because it's just because he's always been so much a part of a team and partnering up with people and a backup character, and I didn't have time to go through dozens of backup stories in Detective. So I knew as part of the Justice League, I thought surely there's got to be an Elongated Man story that's focused on him, and I found that in Justice League Quarterly number 6, and it was a story, and these were back in the early 90s. They were, the square bound, I don't know how many pages, maybe 80, but the title of the story was called Take My Wife, Please, and it was written by an early writing chore of or duty by Mark Waid. And you had the extraordinary Eduardo Barreto on pencils and inks. And basically, you have Elongated Man, Wally West Flash, Guy Gardner, Rocket Red, Fire, Martian Manhunter, um, all as part of the Justice League International, along with Sue, who basically Sue is an annual tradition that she gives her husband a mystery on his birthday, and this one she basically shows that she was kidnapped, and at first you don't know that Ralph knows that this. You wonder, oh my gosh, did she really get kidnapped? Um, but yeah, she's apparently kidnapped, and then he kind of reveals as he enlists the rest of the Justice League to help him find her, and it turns out she's been masquerading as Ice all along, which actually I'm pretty sure he would be able to notice even with a white wig would be able to tell that that's his wife. But hey, it's comics. But it was a really fun story, and I picked this one to be in contrast for some of the later stuff that happened to him, and yeah, so it's a good story to read. It's a nice,
Yes.
crisp, fun, whodunit, and it ends happily.
Well, and in that episode, that issue, you find out that he basically was playing along from the beginning
Yeah,
with the mystery because he noticed, like, it's like that was a thing, like somebody was using their right hand instead of their left hand, and he commented that, so it's like, yeah, he knew 7 minutes into what was going on that it was part of,
yeah,
the mystery, even though he just played along with it.
yeah.
So I
He didn't
assume
want to solve it
he
too
also
soon.
just played.
Let him
Yeah,
have
he
the
didn't want to.
fun.
He also wanted to play along just because he wanted Sue to feel like she had really come up with a good mystery for him to solve. So.
Right. I'm glad you
Now
got
the
to read
other
that.
issue, yes. Oh, and by the way, of all 7 of these elongated man stories that I read, it was my favorite of the 7 for sure.
Okay, good. Yeah,
So yeah,
I probably would say that too. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Now the 52 issue, while it was a very well written and good story, was a whole lot darker.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely
why
darker.
don't you talk a little bit about the 52 issue?
So this is for anyone who's not really familiar with the 52 series. It was a countdown, basically, of a weekly comic that incorporated all kinds of different characters from the DC universe into adventures, and they had multiple storylines, probably 6 or 8 major storylines featuring, everybody from Firestorm to The Question to Elongated Man, or Ralph Dibny, basically, is what he was going by at that point. Now, I have to preface this, and again, spoilers. If you want to read Identity Crisis and learn more about this, you should stop now and go do that.
Yeah.
But a couple years earlier, in the Brad Meltzer Rags Morales story, 7-issue story called Identity Crisis, Sue is raped by Dr. Light, the villainous Dr. Light, and basically we don't learn that until later on, but early on she's actually murdered, and I guess I'm spoiling that too. It was Jean Loring, the Adams wife, that killed her. So without getting into the details, it was really there's a lot of division about this story. There's a lot of people like, well, it's a really good story, we just hate what happened. And I'm kind of falling into that camp because it is a good story, and it really broke me when it came to the good story part. If you see Ralph's reaction portrayed in this story in Identity Crisis, a distraught husband who just found out his wife died and that she was pregnant as well. It's just heartbreaking. But it basically ruined me for ever seeing him or her ever again in a story, at least the way that I remembered them. But
That
anyway,
lighthearted character couple, as opposed to
yeah,
they have this darkness to them now.
yeah, right,
So,
exactly, yeah. So in 52, like I said, a couple years later, in week 42, and Ralph is the storyline. This is like the culmination of a long storyline. You'd have to read several issues to get the whole thing, but basically, in this issue, Ralph's in Dr. Fate's tower in Salem, Massachusetts, and he's beginning the spell to resurrect Sue. He's desperate. He'll do anything to bring her back. And he puts on the helmet of fate, and he basically puts a gun. It's a gun that's got mystical powers. Puts it to the helmet and shoots it. And it's not like he's committing suicide, but he's got a purpose behind it. Ultimately, by doing that, it reveals that helmet was possessed by the villain Felix Faust, the magician villain. And he was posing as Naboo in the helmet for issues before this, trying to get Ralph to do certain things. Faust had somehow early on come across Ralph's wedding ring, and when he had it all along, he was using it as a way to possess the helmet. When Ralph shot the helmet, that ring fell out, and basically Faust planned to trade Dibny's soul to Neron in exchange for his freedom, and Ralph reveals in extraordinary fashion that he was aware of Faust possessing the helmet all along, and this was all a trap that he was setting for him and Neron. So Neron appears, and he kills Ralph Dibny by ripping off Ralph's finger and then flicking his wedding band at him like a bullet, and it rips through his chest. And Ralph gets the last laugh, though, because he had basically trapped Neron and Faust in Dr. Fate's tower with a spell that only could be released by Dibny, but if he's dead, he can't do it. And now that, so they're trapped there, and Ralph knew this all along. And it's, the last scene of the story, you have Beatrice Acosta, the fire. She goes to the grave of Sue Dearbon and sees Ralph's wedding band on top of the grave. So, I mean, this, it was really, like you said, Scott, a really well written story, and it had a lot of darkness. And it's not the elongated man you want to remember, really, but it did give some closure to the situation he was in. If you like anything about continuity, I don't want a new story without any kind of continuity every issue. I want it to carry over a little bit. But seeing him, there were some scenes where it was really great when he was kind of hiding that he didn't have his powers anymore, but he had been secretly drinking the Gingold, and he just put the beat down on Faust. And he said something. I want to ask you if you caught the reference.
Okay.
When he's kind of like doing his monologue, Ralph is saying, he's talking about how he knew that Faust had taken the wedding ring of his to use it as a way to possess the helmet. And he says, he says something about Faust's thing for fingers. What is it with you and fingers?
I don't know that reference.
Okay,
so.
This is a deep cut.
Okay.
For most people, but if you go back to, I want to say, like Justice League of America 5 or so is the cover.
Yeah, that's a little before my time.
Yeah, we're talking about it. It's a very memorable cover, though. It's got Faust holding his hand up, and on each finger is like a finger puppet of a Justice Leaguer.
Oh, okay.
And if you go back, that was actually an homage cover to a Sensation Comics. When it was a Sensation mystery, it was kind of a horror story, and the villain had the same kind of thing where he was controlling people with his fingers, and they were all like puppets on the finger or whatever. But that's why Ralph said that, and that alone made me love this story. I'm like, yes. So, but a lot of it is, if you didn't read the entire run of 52, you wouldn't know what some of the other references were. You're talking about a Kryptonian resurrection, Tim Trench. I didn't remember any of that, so... But it gave Ralph his revenge. You got to see his detective skills one last time,
and in a sense, he does get reunited with Sue.
And he gets reunited with Sue. You're absolutely right. That was it. So,
yeah, both of your two bonus issue stories were excellent. I enjoyed the heck out of both of them. Obviously, more so enjoyed the Justice League Quarterly.
Yeah.
For just the fun of it. but this issue, that issue 42 of 52,
Yeah.
whew, that's tough to. That's
Right.
I hate that title for a series, 52,
Right.
by the way. But yeah, that issue, that was a really also a very, very good issue. I mean, it was.
Well,
If I were to nitpick it, that would actually probably be the superior issue of the two that you picked.
Sure.
But I enjoyed the Justice League Quarterly
Yeah.
issue, at least the
It
elongated
required you to reread it a couple times to actually, because I was like, where did the ring come from? And you had to pick up a line of dialogue to figure out that Faust had. I thought it was like somehow, I just didn't pay attention the first time I read it. So, yeah, it was for different reasons. They were both. I'm glad you liked them because I did try to put some effort into finding some impactful stories, or enjoyable and impactful.
And I'm just going to tell you, you succeeded.
All right.
Okay, let's see. All right. Well, I know the answer for you, and I'm going to go with my pat answer for this question. Do you plan to seek out more stories with this character? And of course, for me, my answer is if I learn that there is a really good storyline, I will pick up this character. Now, you telling me that Elongated Man has sort of showed up in Justice League Unlimited,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about, since that will be on the DC Universe app, maybe just go ahead and start adding Justice League Justice League Unlimited to my read list on that, and just see. It'd be nice to kind of maybe get on the ground floor of this character's return to the DC Universe and see what they do. So I may start reading Justice League Unlimited, because they're only what,
5 or so
half
issues
dozen?
in now.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be hard to catch up.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So
Yeah.
So what is your answer to that same
always,
question?
forever. You know, you knew the answer, and it's, even if I don't like the portrayal, I'll read it and see what, it's just what you do. And I hope that with somebody like Mark Waid, who has a real, and you got other writers in DC right now like Jeremy Adams and stuff, and Josh Williamson, they do like to dig into the history of comic characters, and maybe somebody will say, hey, I got an idea for a story with Ralph and Sue. So that's what I'm holding out for.
Final thoughts, Mike?
Just your best
you
underdog.
kept it under 6 hours. So
No.
You kept it under 6 hours, so yeah.
I will be honest about this. I was always a little bit jealous of Plastic Man, Eel O'Brien getting a place in Grant Morrison's JLA. I'm like, and but that's okay. He's done well. He's different enough, and don't think most people know how different they are. But yeah, I remember being a little bit, just rubbed me a little bit wrong, but it's okay.
All right. Well, our next topic for this episode, we're going to discuss the trade, which is 4 issues of Where Monsters Lie. This is a story written by Kyle Starks, and he is relatively local to both of us. So Kyle Starks is from Evansville, Indiana. So I have, and Mike as well, have had several opportunities to bump into Kyle Starks at conventions, and especially specifically SalukiCon, where he was at. Let's see, this was 3 SalukiCons ago. He was there with Matt Kent, and both Mike and I picked up the first issue of Where Monsters Lie, and then I picked up the trade at the most recent SalukiCon that Kyle Starks was at. Mm-hmm. And is that where you grabbed it too, or did you already have the trade?
Yep, I bought the first issue at the first time he was there, and then I bought the trade at this most recent one.
Yeah, and that's the exact same thing that I did. So I knew that since we both had this trade, it's like, well, that would just make perfect sense for something for us to go in and review and talk about it.
Yeah.
So Where Monsters Lie, 4-issue series from Kyle Starks as the writer, Peter Kowalski as the artist, Vladimir Popov colors, Joshua Reed, letters. This series was published by Dark Horse Comics. and I'm going to give you a real quick synopsis of what happens in this story. So, what happens when a serial killer brings his work home to his gated community of other serial killers? When a serial killer in Wilmhurst does just that, a new level of chaos and horror ensues as a final girl, quote unquote, turned special agent attempts to bring them to justice. So, this was when you hear that premise, it's a pretty interesting. I think it's a pretty interesting premise for a story, right? But the key takeaway for me, and I'm gonna go ahead and say this at the beginning: if you are a fan of your classic horror movies, your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Street, then this 100% is the comic book for you, because this is basically a love letter to all of those old 80s and 90s and even 2000s horror shticks. So, do you want to give a real quick first impression, Mike, of where monsters lie?
Well, it was just a lot of fun. I mean, I can't say I'm a big slasher movie fan, but I liked the idea, the concept, all of this basically conclave of serial killers because of its absurdity. It's hilarious. It's one of them deals where you're like, oh, you can't say that'll never happen. I'm like, come on, it's really, you can't. You have to definitely go. You have to embrace this, and it's done really well. It was so yeah. I'd say fun is the key word here for me.
Yeah. So now I guess we should say that if one is easily offended by violence and language, this is not the book for you. But anybody who's a fan of the horror movies is probably not going to be that easily offended by violence and language. So there you have it. Now, I did do a synopsis for each of these issues individually. There's only 4 of them, but whenever I write these synopses, I like to do a real quick rundown of some of the key characters. So the main character for the story is an individual named Connor Hayes. So Connor Hayes is a law enforcement special agent. They don't really come out and say like FBI or CIA. No. They just kind of refer to some other government agency. But he sports this orange faux hawk haircut. And he actually was, he was a quote-unquote final girl. So he escaped it actually was an amusement park slasher in his early teens. And in fact, he was the final girl for at least 2 of the serial killers who are in this town, this gated community of Wilmhurst. And then Connor is also married to Ella, who has an important role in issue 4. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add about Connor?
No, it's more of a critique. I'm like, okay, I don't know what agency this guy's with, but to have that faux hawk, I'm like, I'm pretty sure they have pretty strict grooming standards. Yeah. But it's just a niggling type thing. It just made me think, whoa. But
okay, so I'm okay with the faux hawk. I honestly thought the exact same thing that you did. However, it becomes important for identifying the character in the flashbacks.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's why I 100% accept the faux hawk.
Yeah, I agree. That's one way the reader knows right off the bat that this guy, it gives you motivation for why he became a detective or a special agent. Mm-hmm. It's why he focuses on serial killers. He was basically an almost victim for some of these, and some of his friends were killed by the serial killers. So he has plenty of motivation.
So the second character is a character named Linus Merriweather. Now, there are a group of boys that escape from one of the homes that the serial killers are living in, and he is the one survivor of that group, and he has a role to play throughout this story. Mm-hmm. Now, the rest of these characters are just what I'm going to call the homages or the love letters to various other horror genres. So you have Zell and her. Now they refer to these extra characters as her shape. In other words, it's like the big giant killer. Mm-hmm. So Zell is the head, and I think her last name must be Dawson, and her shape is named Daniel Dawson. She is the head of the Wilmhurst community. She's a former hotel owner. So to me, this is kind of that homage to Psycho and or Friday the 13th, where you've got the big killer and tied to the mother.
Right. Both of them.
That's kind of the homage. Yeah, the kind of the homage there. The next character is named Wyatt. Now, we get his last name in one of the later issues, and I forgot to write it down. But he apparently kind of acts as Zell's second in command. He's the owner of Baphomet, who we'll talk about later on. And Wyatt's serial killer thing is he's the head of a family that kind of kills across the country. So I wasn't really for sure what that was a specific reference to horror movie-wise, but it's like the traveling serial killer who's, driving the roadways.
Right.
Yeah. The next serial killer we have is Puzzle Man, and Puzzle Man designs these killer traps a la Saw. So to me, this is kind of like the Saw villain.
And I didn't know that. I'd never seen any of the Saw movies.
I maybe saw the first Saw. I think there have been 9 of them, because I think I saw that number 10 got canceled.
Yeah.
But I've only seen, or maybe even bits and pieces of the first one.
Yeah.
And probably I've seen more parodies of Saw than I've actually seen of Saw itself.
Right.
Now, the next character is named, I'm going to call this character F Master. That is not the name. You can figure out for yourself what the F stands for. But F Master is just a basic serial killer who has apparently lost their interest in killing and is only interested in gardening.
Yeah. Very strange design. He's got this teddy bear on the back of his head somehow. It's different.
Just sits there like a hat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have St. Julian, who's just your typical knife slasher.
Yeah.
Now, Richard the Clown, which I am assuming is some type of a reference to John Wayne Gacy.
Oh, it'd have to be. It'd have to be. I mean, there's no other. Yeah. And I'm one of the. Not many people can say they knew John Wayne Gacy personally, but I did because I worked on Death Row in my early years.
Oh wow! Okay. And then that's why I figured you'd have a few things to say about this issue or these. This book.
Yeah.
Next we have Pack Rat, who I am going Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, I'd say so.
On, and then he also collects body parts apparently, so you kind of have you have that little shtick for his serial killer. Then you have Grandpa and his shape, which he refers to him as his nephew murder or murder nephew, a la Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a la Hillbilly Cannibals type of serial killers. And then the last one, and I think this is all of them, you have I'm going to call it a possessed puppet named Frankie. And Frankie's, I don't know, I put down host in my notes, but it's the person that travels around with Frankie. It's like they seem to be like the ventriloquist, but Frankie's not really a ventriloquist doll. It's actually a possessed doll.
Right.
So this is kind of a combination of, Chucky from Child's Play, and then there was this kind of it was like a PG horror story called Magic, where this ventriloquist doll comes to life. So it's kind of like an homage to those two kind of horror genre shticks. So
yeah, yeah, and his host is a young, pretty woman that doesn't seem to fit in. She's kind of like what's her name on the Munsters?
The teenage daughter. Yeah, I don't know her name either. And it's funny. I don't think they ever say her name.
I don't think so
in these 4 issues.
No.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird, and that's like one of the critiques I have is like even like Connor, the main character's wife. As far as I can tell, you don't learn her name until issue 4.
Yeah.
And which is the last issue of the series.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like sometimes it's like, well, especially it didn't affect me like reading the story. But whenever I'm writing my notes, it's like I had to keep saying, well, Connor's wife. I can't say Ella, which is her name, but we don't learn that until issue 4. So.
Right.
So before we dive into the issue-by-issue synopsis, is there anything initial that you want to say about this story?
No, I think it's covered pretty well. We kind of laid the groundwork here, by talking about the characters and the main premise. So yeah, I think we can go forward with it.
Okay. So I'll take our issue 1 and 3, and you take issue 2 and 4,
Okay.
and we'll just kind of go through, and then we'll talk about each one between synopsis. So issue 1, you have a group of 4 teenage boys who escape a suburban white house. 3 flee to a neighbor's home while 1 hides. The 3 are then killed by other homeowners who happen to also be serial killers. The 1 remaining boy is able to escape. The serial killers then hold a mandatory meeting to remind everyone of the community rules. Rule number 1, don't draw attention to Wilmhurst. And rule number 2, don't kill your fellow residents. Linus Merriweather, the lone surviving boy, meets with Special Agent Connor Hayes at the local police station. Connor Hayes is a specialist on tracking and dealing with serial killers. As Linus describes the events surrounding his capture and escape, Connor recognizes one of the serial killers by their description. Back at home in Wilmhurst, Puzzle Man and St. Julian are hypothetically discussing what happens if one of the victims escapes. St. Julian describes a time in his past when he was struck in the head with a lamp by a victim who managed to escape. However, St. Julian notes that nothing ever comes of someone escaping, just as the police arrive at the gates of Wilmhurst. So this was such a great setup issue. You get introduced to several of the serial killers. I love the idea of the town meeting
Yeah.
for the community.
Yes.
You have them all sitting around in the living room discussing the rules.
Yeah.
And the fact that the clown is creeped out
Oh
by
yeah, I
F-Master.
totally. That was my first note. It's hilarious that killer clown is creeped out by I forgot his name, the guy with the teddy bear on the head.
F-Master.
Yes. And he
Yes.
he doesn't have to sit next to him, as Zell tells him. You don't have to sit next to him, but he just keeps complaining. It's just seeing the absurdity of serial killers and their dysfunctional group. They
Yeah.
it's like a workplace comedy featuring serial killers.
There was just some really, really good scenes, and particularly violent. But just the idea of them sitting around having a meeting, going over the rules of the gated community.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was in this issue or maybe the next issue where they have like the homeowner rules. Oh, it's in this issue, but like Zell, who is the leader, he is walking past and sees the clown. His trash cans are visible. And it's like, that's against HOA rules to have your trash cans
Yeah.
out. Yeah. There was something else I was going to comment on this one.
We're going to talk about the clown wanting to introduce a new feature of his terror with the flamethrower.
Go ahead. Yeah.
He's like, oh, what's more scary than a killer clown and a flamethrower? And she's like, no, that's too much. If you want us to get you some, because they basically, Zell and Wyatt, they basically help them commit their murders, or they give them the equipment, they go shopping
and the
for them.
timeline, and not to have too many, kind of schedule it out, get the most
Yeah.
bang for their buck.
Right. So she's like, no, you're a clown. Do clown stuff. We'll get you some poison popcorn or something. He was not happy about that. And he says, no one chooses to be a clown.
Now, one of the things that I like is that a lot of things that happen later on, there's like foretelling. You get that, like, St. Julian got struck in the head by somebody.
Oh, right.
Zell talking to the grandpa cannibal as he shows up. It's like, you can't have two shades together.
Yes.
All these little tiny one sentence lines that, the F-Master, he loves his garden more than he loves killing anymore. It's just all these little tiny things that actually have impact in the story later on.
Yeah. And I think there's enough intrigue in this first issue. For instance, Zell says something about a murder quota. So you're like, okay, who's establishing this quota? Why is there a quota? Is there something more? What's their motivation? What's Zell and Wyatt's motivation for even helping? What's their benefit, or what are they gaining? So it all leads to, I'm thinking I'm going to get that information in this first few issues, but really you don't. There's going to be a sequel to this.
It definitely has a setup for a sequel. So.
Yeah.
And even talk about, and I'll just, again, I guess it's not a spoiler because it comes up in this issue, but like Puzzle Man, the reason why, and he's the one who brought the kids in, broke the community rules, that the 4 kids that escaped, is because they haven't let him, do any killing in a while. Mm-hmm. So it's like he's mad, and like, well, Zell comes to him and say, well, if you could come up with something better than penis traps, then we would, let you go. So until you get a better idea, you're stuck.
Yeah.
So you got any other thoughts on issue 1?
No, I just thought issue 1 was fantastic.
Yeah, it was really, really good. Yeah. So, well, they're all. I'll just go and say all 4 issues of this are really, really good. So I think, anyway. So, well, Mike, you want to handle the issue 2 synopsis?
Sure. Okay, issue 2. In his home, Puzzleman, and I'm sorry, I have to interject. There is a point that is made that he doesn't want to be called Puzzle Man. It's Puzzleman, and if you in the early on, he says that. So I even tried to pronounce it the way he wants. Anyway, in his home, Puzzleman asks St. Julian what they're going to do about all the cops surrounding them, to which St. Julian replies, "We're all going to kill a bunch of cops." Flashback 20 years prior to a grisly amusement park scene with a boy sporting an orange faux hawk. Its sole survivor as Zell and her shape leave the scene. Flashback to 15 years prior at an orphanage to a boy with an orange faux hawk again, striking a slasher in the head with a lamp and escaping. Back in the present, Connor Hayes reports in with his fiancée Ella and then brings local law enforcement under his command. He takes Linus back to Wilmhurst to identify the homes and send the police in pairs to investigate each house. At F Master's house, F Master hides from the police. Frankie's host is put into the squad car with Linus. Wyatt kills the officers at his home with a hammer. Frankie and St. Julian make quick work of many of the officers outside. In Zell's home, Connor has a sit-down with her as he recognizes her from 20 years prior at the amusement park. Zell informs Connor she has been keeping tabs on him since he is a quote-unquote final girl. Back outside, Frankie's host grabs a gun to kill additional cops as Linus escapes to the barn. Inside the barn is a cage with a large growling creature inside, so Linus turns and leaves immediately, as I would. The clown joins the fray with a flamethrower. Zell and Connor continue their discussion about Daniel Dawson, Zell's shape. Connor informs Zell he has been training for the sole purpose of killing Daniel Dawson. Connor notices the commotion outside, and Zell takes the opportunity to sneak out the back and meet up with Wyatt. Connor looks on the scene of a clown with a flamethrower as St. Julian watches Connor from the roof of Zell's house. A lot happened this issue.
A lot happened, and there's a lot that happens in each of these issues. Yeah. There is not a whole lot of quiet going on. I mean, if it is quiet, it's just there to, set up the next portion of the story.
Right.
Yeah. I think a lot of writers would have turned this into like an 8-issue series, but yeah, it's very condensed. You don't have to. There's not anything that drags on, for too terribly long.
Yep, good.
and I like how they kind of follow. Like, okay, they make a joke. It's like, okay, everybody go in pairs. Don't separate. Stay in pairs. But then what's one of the first thing that Connor does is he's in a group of 3 and he separates himself from the other 2. So he's going alone, but he breaks his own rule.
Right. The cops overall are just inept. I mean, it's like,
terribly.
Reno 911 or whatever that's called. I mean, just it's kind of also that a stretch that someone like Connor has ran into so many serial killers before, but that's you got to have the motivation. Otherwise, it's not really. Yeah. So again, you just have to not worry about the unlikelihood of it all.
Yeah. Well, that's part of it. It's like in a lot of like your horror movies, I'm thinking of like there was like a Valentine's Day killer, and it's like again, they were people who survived some other serial killer before,
right?
So that they later on become a serial killer.
It's a trope.
So it's
and
almost
I think Starks is definitely he's like making, he's kind of like homaging or just, he's kind of just, he's doing this because he knows what the tropes are. So it's fun that way.
Yeah. And he's just leaning into it.
Yeah,
and it's great. It is 100% great just to lean in on these. So, I don't know. You got any other comments for issue 2?
This is where I'm like, how does Frankie work? It's early on. I was like, I thought he was just kind of like the ventriloquist. It was still the bad guy that was controlling him, but no, he definitely has magic behind him because he was able to kill some police on his own. There was. I dug the monologue. I mean, if you want a good exposition or a history of what motivates Connor, you just have to go to the page where he's talking to Zell and he's talking about how he spent his life building his body and his mind into something greater. It was, it's really, it gives you everything you need to know about him. So
sounds like another person who wears a bat costume to me.
I know I think that's what starts with doing. He's kind of like, this is he's kind of making fun of the Batman thing. Yeah.
But I also like, I mean, it's just a trope, and that's one of the tropes of horror movies, is that you have the final girl, the one girl who survives.
And I had never heard of that term, or I hadn't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And this time, though, instead of it being a final girl, it's a final guy, but they still refer to the final girl because that's the trope, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so issue 3. So this issue begins with Zell and Wyatt leaving Wilmhurst. Wyatt explains he needs to release Baphomet from their cage before they blow up the town to cover up the evidence of their existence. As they approach the gate leading into Wilmhurst, Zell pulls out a revolver and kills the one guard at the gate. Back in Wilmhurst, Connor watches the chaos the serial killers are wreaking on the remaining members of law enforcement. Connor then kills Packrat, the clown, Frankie and Frankie's assistant, before being sliced in the back by St. Julian. The surviving officers are dismayed at what they have just witnessed. While standing around discussing it, one of the officers kicks some flowers in a garden. F-Master then proceeds to attack them with a push mower, his apparent killer tendencies restored. Linus has so far managed to escape the carnage, but is found by 2 of the remaining officers. As the officers decide what to do with Linus, with the option of being to kill Linus in case he is also a serial killer, Baphomet, who is an apparent homage to Cujo, attacks them. Attacks them and then begins to chase Linus, who flees back to Puzzleman's house. Connor catches up with St. Julian in the woods, and after a knife fight, Connor kills St. Julian, only to find Zell's shape, Daniel Dawson, standing behind him. So yeah, I'm assuming that Baphomet is an homage to Cujo, the killer dog.
I don't know why I didn't think of that, because I've even read that book, Yeah,
and of course, I guess Cujo was just a rabid dog, not a giant, you know.
Yeah, he was a Saint Bernard, so he was a rabid Saint Bernard. So if you want to talk about a big rabid dog, that would be Cujo.
That would be Cujo, yeah. So, but it's kind of funny how the F-Master, when the cops come to his door, he like hides. But man, as soon as one of them kicks some of his flowers, boom, he goes back into serial killer mode in a big way.
I can think of a lot of ways I'd rather die than be chewed up by a lawnmower. And it was so cool to see. I mean, because you're always wanting the good guy to win in any of these, and just seeing so many of these serial killers getting killed by Connor. I mean, he was going through them, which serial killers can be replaced. It's not like they're, but it's you're not attached to him. But it was like fun to see him do that, and I had to laugh again. I want to talk to Kyle Starks again and ask how he came up with some of the conversations of these cops, because it's not doing the profession any favors by portraying them this way, because they are got the goofy. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, man, that stab wound in my belly kind of hurts. And
that man has a teddy on his head.
Yeah. It's just so nonchalant. Yeah.
Now and just so I can, throw something critical into this against the story, there were moments where it's like the art did not quite perfectly to me convey what was going on. So like this scene where F Master comes out with the lawnmower.
Yeah.
Okay, so you see him. There's 2 cops standing out there. All right, and he lifts up the lawnmower going at the 2 cops. And it's like the first one, it's like he chops off his arm.
Yeah.
And then the second one, it's like he drops the mower on top of his head. So it's like, oh, well, there were 2 cops there. He just killed 2 cops. But then F Master runs away, and there's 2 more cops shooting at him.
Yeah, so where the
so
other
it's
2
like,
yeah.
Yeah, so were there 4 cops? Were there, there were 3 cops, I guess, standing outside, but then you only see 2 of the cops.
And they weren't very good shot.
Yeah, and it's like when F Master attacks the one, he probably attacked the one that kicked the flowers, who was by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever he picks up the mower, you see the 2 cops. So there's a little bit of some, but that's me, just trying to, come up with something to criticize. It's just like, so there's a little bit there that can get a little bit confusing. I kind of look at that a couple of times to really get the full story there. But even then, it's one of those. It's almost maybe that was intentional. Maybe that's just a trope where they mess something up in the storytelling.
Sure.
of these horror movies.
Yep.
So that could have even been a deliberate thing.
Yep.
I also like them, Linus comes back into the scene. They knew who Linus was because they rode back to Wilmhurst with him. But it's like, well, maybe we should just go ahead and kill him in case he's also a serial killer like everybody else that's around here.
Yeah. I mean, poor kid. My gosh.
Yeah. That was pretty ruthless.
And he's got a rough way to go in the next issue, too.
That is for sure. So, well, speaking of the next issue, Mike, you want to handle issue 4?
I can't hardly read this first line without cringing myself. So,
well, okay, if it's too cringy, I'll read it. If it's going to offend you,
no,
okay, all right.
It's just like So issue 4, Linus finds himself in Puzzleman's penis trap. No, they weren't just talking about the penis trap. He really had one. And Puzzleman forces Linus to choose between losing his hand and his most personal member. Puzzleman expects this dilemma to take Linus a long time to choose from, but quickly chooses to lose his hand and escape the trap. Back at Grandpa's home, Grandpa releases his nephew to procure some fresh meat for the cannibals. Connor continues to fight Zell's shade, Daniel Dawson, with little success. As Daniel Dawson prepares to deliver the killing blow, Grandpa's nephew arrives on the scene and the 2 shapes face off. Puzzleman, meanwhile, receives a text from Wyatt that the entire complex is going to blow up and he should leave now if he's able. But Linus arrives with the clown's flamethrower and less one hand and burns Puzzleman to a crisp before passing out from the blood loss. The 2 shapes continue the battle until Grandpa's nephew has a chainsaw malfunction. Wyatt warns Daniel Dawson he needs to leave, but a newly conscious Connor renews his attack. While Connor fights Daniel, Grandpa's nephew slices Daniel in half, top down, with his newly discovered chainsaw. Connor picks up his gun and kills the nephew. Grandpa crawls into the scene, bemoaning the loss of his boy before taking a bite out of his belly flesh. Whew. Cannibals. Connor puts a bullet into Grandpa. Connor turns back to Wilmhurst to discover a mob of zombies heading this way. But at this point, the explosives go off, destroying the neighborhood. Back at the police station, Connor is forced to turn in his badge and weapon until the events at Wilmhurst are reviewed. Connor returns home to his wife, who informs him her dad came to visit. As she yells, "Daddy!" Connor is struck on the head by the butt of a shotgun. Connor awakens to find himself tied to a chair and in the room with Ella, her father Wyatt, and Zell. Ella announces she is pregnant with Connor's child. Zell informs Connor that as a surviving final girl, they have been watching him for a long time. Normally, they would just kill him, but their child complicates matters. Connor is given the choice to either die now or become the serial killer he is always meant to be and head to the new Wilmhurst. Linus awakens to find himself with his wound patched. Nearby are F Master and Baphomet with a burning Wilmhurst in the background. Wow.
Yeah. So that was a great ending because you really kind of have a complete story, but it also leaves room that we could get volume 2 of Where Monsters Lie.
Yeah.
Without too much work.
Yes.
On their part. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I have to. I'm impressed with the idea for the death trap that Linus was in, because it was not something that you really want to be in ever.
Nope. Nope.
Um,
But
yeah.
it turns out Zell was right in that it was a stupid idea because he chose really, really quickly, so there was no tension build up. It's
right.
That was a no-brainer
True.
for him.
True.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I mean, they did hint. I mean, again, we get some very minor hints. Like Wyatt has, he has a family. So, and then that's like the big surprise at the end. It's like, well, Ella's father is Wyatt, who is one of the serial killers there, and they've been married for all of this time, and now they have a child. So it's like, is the child, the next, serial killer to be born? Is Connor just always meant to be a serial killer because he was the survivor of at least 2 of the previous serial killer murder sprees. There's just so much, going on in this story. It's just, man, it's a quick read, but
it
2,
is,
it's just so much fun if you have any, interest in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s horror movies, and just it's funny in all the right spots, and it just hits so many excellent beats for me.
Yeah. I have to admit, I was not expecting the twist at the end. I didn't know how. I'm not really good at predicting the ends of a story, but the twist of Connor's wife actually being Wyatt's daughter, and that was a neat ending, and like you said, with room to take it on to the next chapter. I mean, it was you knew it was, the part I did predict was there was going to be an ultimate battle between the shapes, between the Michael Meyer-like Dawson and the nephew, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre nephew. I didn't know where the zombies came from, though. There was no hint of zombies anywhere in the story.
And I think that was it's just another horror movie trope.
Sure.
And instead of having to deal with the zombies, well, that's where the explosion takes care of it.
Yeah, right.
Just, okay, let's just blow everything up.
Yeah.
We don't have to deal with the zombies. They're taken care of.
That's
so
true.
I think it was just like, it's kind of like one of those moments where it's like, oh my gosh, what's next? And then it's like, okay, it kind of resolves itself.
Maybe we can get Kyle Starks on this show sometime and talk to us about this, because it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate his imagination. And everybody loves a reference to some other, especially if it's in another medium, like TV or movies.
Now you have the trade, right?
Yeah.
Did you look at Kyle Starks' preliminary sketches for like some of these characters?
I think I just skimmed through them.
Yeah.
But
because he has a very, and I don't mean this in any shape, form, or fashion as an insult. He's not the artist on this, but his prelim sketch, I would call him a very cartoony artist.
Yeah.
And this is actually the only place where I learned that the clown was named Richard. I don't remember him being called Richard in the book anyplace, but here he has a little note beside his clown sketch that says Richard the Clown.
Yeah.
So, and then he has like some prelim ideas for Zell and Wyatt and Daniel Dawson. Then he has like a little colored, sketch of F Master and Richard and the Frankie with, again, the host, the unnamed host.
Right.
And Zell and Puzzleman and Daniel Dawson. It's just like, it's kind of like an actual cool image. I wonder how this book would have felt with Kyle Stark's art style as opposed to Piotr Kowalski's art style.
Yeah.
It definitely would have had a different feel. I think this was the right choice artist wise.
Yeah. What do you? Which one of the serial killers creeped you out the most?
Oh gosh. Probably, you're putting me on the spot here. So we've got, I don't know. Maybe Wyatt, because he's the most real.
Oh, true. He could blend in with anybody.
Yeah,
anywhere.
he's just this normal guy until he's not.
Yeah.
So So yeah, I don't know. They're all kind of so over the top that I don't look at them as anything
Sure.
realistic. So it's like it's so over the top that it's not really scary, you know.
Name the host here. Did you say that earlier? Pearl?
I don't know.
It's right
Oh,
here
is
in the
it
sketch
Pearl?
of her. It's called Pearl. She's called Pearl, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Okay, so no, I missed that whenever I was going over the sketches.
But
So, yep,
my
I see
creepiest
that
one
now.
is Grandpa Murder. Just the
Oh,
idea he's
yeah.
got the whole family of nephews and whatever that are cannibals. That just freaks me the heck out. And yeah, it's
Well, I don't know. This story reminded me of an episode of the X-Files,
yeah.
where one of the episodes of the X-Files, they go and it's kind of like a hillbilly cannibal type of a story, but it's this group, this family that has lived isolated so long that all of the members of the family are products of incest.
Mm-hmm.
Like multiple generations, they
Mm-hmm.
keep mother like on a rollout cart underneath the bed, and it's
Ooh.
just like, ooh, that is creepier than anything that's in here. But yeah, it's just one
Yeah.
of those. Yeah, I'm glad that character or that homage was not in this book, because then it would be an easy answer about which one was the creepiest.
Right.
So that also probably puts maybe the correct answer is Grandpa, because of it's the closest thing to that X Files
True.
X Files reference. So. Well, do you have any final comments you want to make about the final girl, Connor, in this story, Where Monsters Lie, by Kyle Starks?
I like it enough. I want to see what the next chapter might be like. I mean, they tease you with, well, will he take the bait and become a serial killer himself because that's secretly what he wants to be, or will he continue the fight for the good? What's his status going to be with his fiance, who's the daughter of a serial killer and probably knew a lot about what her dad did? It's yeah, I think he just dangled enough out there that I'm interested to see how it's going to end up.
And I want to add that Kyle Starks is one of these writers he is on the edge of going to the next level.
Yeah.
He has several projects now that have been optioned. He has an OGN called Kill Them All that's been optioned. Some of his other work has been optioned, and it just takes one of these, to take off, to get that next step, to have a director assigned to it, and people will start knowing his name.
Yeah.
So he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on.
Yep. Yep.
You want to give it a grade?
Sure.
All right. What do you got? Or you
Uh,
want me to go first?
no, let me go first because I'm bad about
Okay.
being swayed by. I'm going to give it a very fine minus 7.5. It's an above average collectible with a modern defect, and I wouldn't even say it's got any defects. It's just got a. It's not necessarily my genre of choice, but I think that Kyle Starks done so well with his imagination and put a story out there that could be enjoyable to anyone, regardless of what you like. So hats off to him for that.
I've actually got this at a very fine plus. So I'll just flip your minus to a plus, which is an 8.5. Even I always growing up, I always liked horror movies. I saw all of the cheeseball horror movies. I Spit on Your Grave and all of those horror movies. So this was, I mean, again, it's weird to use the term love letter when you're talking about a horror movie,
Right.
but this is just a love letter to all those classic horror genres. So if you are a horror movie fan, this book to me is a no-brainer. It's an
Yep.
absolute must-read. I like it. I'm glad I already own the first issue, so I don't have to go out and track it down. Since I say
Yep.
it's above an 8.0, it has to be something that goes into my collection. I already have it.
Yep.
So I do not have to add that in. So yeah, I'm going with a very fine plus 8.5. You got time for a CLZ shake, Mike?
Always time for a CLZ shake.
Always time for a CLZ shake. You want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'm good either way. I'm
Okay, well I've got it open right here.
Okay.
Shake it up, and we've got Eternals issue number. What issue number is this? This is issue number 17, which I think might be the final issue of the series. Now, I have read this, which is nice, so I made it a point to collect the entire Eternals run, because I wanted to read it all, or the Kirby run of Eternals. Prior to the Eternals movie, which, by the way, I think is much better than most people give credit to.
Yeah.
It is, in my opinion, the best Justice League movie that we have had as a feature film so far. But in this one, I'm just going to read the plot here from CLZ. Makari, Icarus, and Zurus face off against Andromedon together, but even their combined might seems helpless against him. But can Cersei's arrival turn the tide of the battle? And it's not the final issue. Is 19 the final issue? Okay, yeah, 19 is the final issue. So this is close to the end of Kirby's run on Eternals.
I think I would like to read that original run of the Eternals. I think I would, add that to my many.
It is on the Marvel app. So
yeah, I mean
it's easy to read. It is a little wordy because it's Kirby at this time, and it gets a little wordy.
Yeah.
But and I think the earlier issues are better than some of the later issues, but it's Kirby. Yeah. So I got to give it a little bit of a pass.
What year did that come out?
So I've already closed it. It was like 70.
It was after his stint at DC, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because when he came back to Marvel, wanted to have he didn't want to have any editorial oversight. He wanted to do his own stories. So that's where we got Eternals. We got the Mad Bomb and Captain America. We got a very funky Black Panther storyline. So let's see. Eternals 1 was 1976. So this would have been around 78.
Okay.
Then.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
What you got?
I don't know if you can see it or not.
I see JLA, so it looks like the Grant Morrison
Oh, yes,
series.
it is. It's JLA number 12, the first appearance.
That's a Tower of Babel storyline, isn't it?
No, I think that's later. This is
okay.
This is part 3 of 6 of Rock of Ages.
Oh, okay.
And it's the first appearance of the android Hourman. And I'm surprised.
Which spoiler we'll be talking about in our next episode.
Yeah.
For JSApril, right?
Well, let me backtrack here. It says first appearance of Hourman Matthew Tyler. I don't remember the android having an alter ego, so maybe there was another, because this kind of like went back and forth from the future to the past or to the present. So I think this might be yet another Hourman. So I don't know.
Oh,
now I got to read this too, but it's issue 12 of JLA. Again, folks, you're not going to go wrong if you read the first 15, 20 issues of that late 90s, early 2000s JLA run. It's just, well, it'd be late 90s. It's one of the brightest spots in the 90s, actually, comics-wise. So, yeah. Gosh.
Good deal.
So much to read, so little time.
Oh, yeah. That's the bad thing about talking about too many comic books, is that you just all these things that you want to sit down and read. Now it's like, do I need to reread Eternals because I flipped that open?
Yeah. Well, that's one thing about doing this podcast. It forces us to not be so random about what we read. Yeah.
Exactly, and try to expand our horizons just a little bit. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, Mike, I think we've already hinted at it, but what's coming up on what will be 207 of the Campus Comics Cast?
Well, it would be JSApril, and it will be issues 68 through 72. It's sort of a crossover between the present day, at least present day as of the early 2000s JSA, and the 1940s/50s JSA, all to fight and defeat Perdigaton.
Okay. I won't put you on the spot about the roadshow, but how could somebody reach out to you if they wanted to talk to you besides podcasts at bergcomics.com?
Well, you can email me at mike@comicshoproadshow.com, or you can hit me up on the Campus Comics Cast Facebook page, or you can send something, a message, or put a post to my attention on the Blue Sky account that I have, which is also under Comic Shop Roadshow. So, any of those ways. While I was sitting there talking, I was trying to remember what the next episode but I can go ahead and say it'll be out pretty soon. Matt Martin and I reviewed the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. It was a 12-issue volume, so it was a lot to edit. And the shop.
And Matt Martin likes to talk about
yes.
Uncle's or Scrooge McDuck. So
he loves DuckTales.
It's gonna be a
he
long
loves all
one.
things Disney. He loves the Ducks especially. But he was the perfect co-host for that issue, that episode. And the shop that recommended it was Austin Games and Comics and Books, obviously from Austin. So that'll be coming out hopefully in the next week or two if I can get my stuff together.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't going to mention it, because that's now the third episode of the Campus Comics Cast
that I've said
that we've talked about the Scrooge McDuck.
I'm trying. I got life and everything. It's like, oh yeah, I need to retire from work so I can just do comic stuff.
So you can just sit there and read comic books. So,
yes. Yeah.
I get it.
What a greater retirement could there be?
Well, I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at burgcomics.com, BURGcomics.com, where you'll find links to my eBay store and social media pages. And we'll be back soon with JSApril.
As my camera goes to my crotch. Your camera just dropped. Well, I like it. Just like blue. Yeah, it's my blue light. Nice keyboard, mechanical keys, all that good stuff. You can see the dust on top of my monitor because I went out of focus. There we go. But yeah, last time this happened to me, I was able to touch it and hold it, and it would refocus on me. Yeah. But it's not. Does it need to be focusing like it's supposed to? No, it has built-in AI, and it's supposed to know. You, yeah. There we go. Okay, now it's going over here. So if I go like this, it's supposed to follow me. See? And now it's back centered where it's supposed to be. So there we go. So yeah, but just every once in a while, it just focuses someplace else. Of its own. Well, it's AI, so yeah. Like you see, whenever I lean this way, it follows me over here. Yeah. And if I lean back this way, it follows me over here. I'm not having to control it at all. It's doing all that on its own. Well, sometimes I want to be out of view of the camera, so I couldn't have that. Yep, that is also true. But no, it's a nice camera. I like it. So I don't know how the picture looks on your end, but that's good. Yeah, it's more clear than mine, or than what I see myself. So yeah.
Back in 1940, 8 sensational heroes united to create the world's very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. Now, 85 years later, we're gathering podcasters and bloggers from around the globe for a month-long celebration in an event we're calling JSApril. Throughout April 2025, join dozens of all-star podcasters and bloggers as they each share their own unique tributes to the original and greatest superhero team, covering exciting topics like
Superman Family number 211, October 1981.
Mr. and Mrs. Superman attend the wedding of Batman and Catwoman.
JSA number 1 from 2024.
JSA 68 through 72.
All-Star Comics number 58.
JSA number 59 from 2004.
Justice League of America 171.
And Justice League of America 172.
The Legacy of the JSA Character Names.
The Brave and the Bold number 61.
The Golden Age Wonder Woman JSA Adventures.
JLA, JSA, Virtue and Vice, 2002.
DC Special number 29, featuring the untold origin of the Justice Society.
Infinity Inc. Annual number 1, JSA number 38, and the Stargirl TV series.
Justice Society of America number 6 from 1993.
Justice Society of America number 20.
Justice Society of America Annual number 1, 2008.
Justice Society of America number 10 from 2007.
All-Star Comics number 4 from 1941.
The Wonder Woman Spectacular from 1978.
Celebrate with JSA 85th birthday cookies.
The 1987
7 Infinity Inc. and Outsiders specials.
Wanted, the world's most dangerous villains number 6 from 1973.
The recent Alan Scott Green Lantern miniseries.
Examining the role of the Justice Society in the crisis.
And the effect the crisis had on the team.
More Fun Comics 55 from 1940.
Contrasting the Justice Society of America versus Marvel's Invaders.
In Post-Crisis, how the JSA inspired the JLA.
Justice League of America number 29 through 30, plus The Flash number 123.
Golden Age Origins number 1.
Showcase number 97 to 99 from 1978.
The Justice Society versus Extant.
All-Star Squadron, issues 19 and 20 from 1983.
All-Star Comics, issues 60 to 63.
JSA number 56 through number 58 from 2004.
JSA, The Liberty File.
Justice Society of America, Thy Kingdom Come.
And that's just some of the topics that will be covered during the celebration. Get ready for a thrilling month of beloved characters, fascinating insights, and incredible stories. Follow the action on social media with the hashtag JSApril, and visit our website for a complete list of participating podcasters, bloggers, and what they're each covering at fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril.